This video is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, is coincidental. They say every great league has its legends, its rising stars, and its forgotten names. But in the eerie history of the Continental Basketball Federation, no story has unsettled fans more than that of rookie guard Eli Cross, a name that seemed to appear overnight and then vanish just as quickly. When the North Point Phantoms announced his signing late in the preseason, reporters scrambled to learn more about the wiry, 6'3" player with a stare too intense for his age. No college record, no junior league highlights, no hometown stories, just a single press release stating he was ready for the pros. In an era where every athlete is tracked, filmed, and dissected before they even touch a professional court, Eli was a ghost in every sense but flesh. Still, the Phantoms put him on the roster, and fans, hungry for a miracle season, embraced him like he was destined to deliver something they had been waiting years for. The first whispers about him weren't about his skill, but about the strangeness that surrounded him. Teammates recalled how he barely spoke, how his locker always looked untouched, as if he floated in and out of the room without leaving a trace. The coaches praised his work ethic, but behind closed doors, even they admitted he played with an otherworldly rhythm, as if he knew the plays before they were drawn, the moves before defenders thought of them. On the hardwood, he dazzled. Quick crossovers, sharp passes, a jump shot that seemed to pause in midair before slicing through the net. But the crowd noticed something different. When Eli checked into a game, the arena grew quiet, as though sound itself bent around him. The roar of sneakers on the court dimmed, the chants faltered, and even the cameras struggled to capture him cleanly. Replays blurred. Photographs warped. He was a presence, but not one technology seemed eager to preserve. Yet the Phantoms didn't care. In his first month, Eli lifted the team from mediocrity to momentum. Reporters called him a revelation, but behind every headline was a question nobody could answer. Where did he come from? And how did he get here? Rumors spread through North Point like wildfire. Some claimed he was a prodigy hidden overseas. Others swore they saw him years ago on forgotten street courts playing games that ended without scores. The strangest whispers, though, came from fans who swore they recognized his face, not from basketball, but from obituaries, old crime stories, and faded yearbooks of boys who were long gone. Still, winning erases doubt, and Eli Cross became the darling of a cursed franchise. The Phantoms were finally relevant again. But as quickly as he rose, shadows began to follow. Players complained of sleepless nights, coaches whispered of cold drafts that slithered through the practice gym, and one assistant swore he saw Eli's reflection in the mirror move seconds after Eli himself had turned away. Nobody wanted to believe it, but in the back of every mind, one question grew louder. Was Eli Cross ever really meant to be here at all? And then came the night when everything changed, the rally that would become his last. The locker room of the North Point Phantoms had always been a place of noise, banter, music blasting from tinny speakers, sneakers squeaking against tile, the constant murmur of exhausted men turning into warriors. But after Eli Cross arrived, the noise thinned out like mist burned away by the sun. Teammates found themselves speaking in hushed tones, as though raising their voices might disturb something fragile, something lurking just outside their awareness. Eli didn't help matters. He arrived early, sat silently at the farthest corner, and stared at the floor as though listening to a tune no one else could hear. Some players tried to welcome him in, tossing jokes or extending a handshake, but Eli's responses were either delayed or oddly rehearsed, like he had memorized the rituals of human interaction without truly understanding them. The veterans whispered about it first. One night, during a tense road trip, point guard Marcus Harlan swore he walked into the showers and saw Eli standing there fully clothed, staring at the wall, the steam curling around him as though it passed through his body instead of clinging to his skin. Another teammate, Jamal West, claimed that Eli's locker always smelled faintly of smoke, though the trainers checked a dozen times for faulty wiring or burnout bulbs. A rookie trainer once dropped a roll of athletic tape near Eli's bench. When he bent to pick it up, he froze. The tape had stopped rolling inches from Eli's foot, as if an unseen hand had pressed it flat against the tile. These stories didn't make the press. They lived in whispers, traded between players during bus rides and long nights in empty hotels. Coaches warned the team to stay focused, to avoid distractions, but the rumors spread faster than strategy. Was Eli sick? Haunted? Was he even human? When reporters asked about him, teammates offered generic praise. He's a great player, works hard, we're lucky to have him. But the eyes behind those words told another story, one of unease, of men trapped between the thrill of winning and the dread of not knowing who, or what, was helping them win. And then came the stories that blurred the line between coincidence and omen. Twice, before crucial games, Eli disappeared from the locker room minutes before tip-off, only to reappear on the court when his name was called, sweat already glistening on his forehead, as though he'd been playing elsewhere. One assistant coach claimed to have checked the practice gym late at night, only to see Eli scrimmaging, alone, against shadows that moved like defenders, sliding and jumping, contesting shots that no one else could see. The coach quit a week later, citing personal reasons. For the Phantoms' management, none of it mattered. Eli was selling tickets, putting the franchise on highlight reels, making fans believe in magic again. But inside the locker room, the air grew heavier. Players sat with their backs to the wall, glancing sideways at the rookie whose eyes sometimes seemed to glow under the flicker of fluorescent light. And with every win, with every strange silence, with every impossible performance, one truth became harder to deny. Eli Cross was not like the rest of them. The team told themselves it didn't matter. They needed him. They would keep playing, keep winning. But deep down, they knew something was coming. And when it came, no amount of talent or teamwork could keep the darkness out. It was supposed to be the Phantoms' moment, the night when years of mediocrity melted away under the lights of a packed North Point arena. They called it the Rally, a late-season clash against their fiercest rivals, the Bayview Titans. The city buzzed with electricity. Ticket scalpers crowded street corners, fans painted their faces black and silver, and even local newscasters spoke as though the game carried something more than playoff implications. To the faithful, it felt like destiny, and at the center of it all was Eli Cross. This was his stage, his proving ground, and maybe, though no one dared to say it aloud, his reckoning. From the opening tip, Eli played as if tethered to an unseen rhythm, gliding through defenders with a grace that left the Titans scrambling. He hit shots that bent physics, threading the ball through hands that should have blocked him. Every basket ignited the crowd, but the roar carried a strange echo, as if the sound was being swallowed and returned slightly distorted. By halftime, Eli had scored 23 points, and the Phantoms led by double digits. Yet even as fans erupted in joy, unease crept through the building. Spectators swore the temperature dipped whenever Eli touched the ball. Photographers complained their cameras kept blurring mid-shot. And on the broadcast, one commentator whispered off mic, "It's like he's not all here." The second half unraveled like a fever dream. With 5 minutes left, the Phantoms clung to a slim lead. Eli dribbled at the top of the key, eyes fixed on a defender who looked more terrified than determined. Then it happened. Eli drove left, rose for a mid-range jumper, and vanished. Not in the metaphorical sense. Not because the defense smothered him. No. One moment he was there, rising with impossible balance, and the next he dissolved into air, leaving the ball to drop harmlessly onto the hardwood. The crowd gasped, 1,000 voices colliding in disbelief. For a heartbeat, the entire arena fell into silence, the kind that presses against your chest and makes the world feel unreal. Players froze. Referees stared at each other, waiting for an explanation that wouldn't come. The Titans huddled nervously, while the Phantoms searched the court, the bench, the tunnel, anywhere he might have gone. But Eli Cross was gone. No substitution, no injury, no stumble into the crowd. Gone. The ball rolled to a stop at half court, and the game resumed with the Phantoms playing as though their souls had been drained. They lost by 12, but the score didn't matter. Nobody remembered the baskets that followed, only the sight of a rookie dissolving before their eyes. In the days that followed, the league issued statements calling it a camera malfunction and a miscommunication. The official story insisted Eli had left due to illness, escorted quietly out of the arena. But fans knew better. They had seen the impossible, felt the shift in the air, heard the silence. The footage released to the public was curiously edited, showing Eli running off toward the tunnel, though those who were there swore that moment never happened. Questions multiplied, and for the phantoms, so did fear. If Eli had disappeared once, could he come back? And if he did, what would return with him? The rally, once meant to be a night of triumph, became the beginning of a legend, the night when the ghost player truly earned his name. When the arena emptied out that night, security staff moved through the silence with flashlights cutting across the deserted stands. The court, usually buzzing with echoes of sneakers and cheers, sat unnervingly still, as though it too was stunned by what had unfolded. That's when they noticed it. Faint streaks across the hardwood, marks that weren't from sneakers or sweat. Thin black smudges ran in odd, swirling patterns, like smoke had settled onto the floor and etched itself into the grain. The maintenance crew scrubbed for hours, but the stains didn't fade. Instead, they seemed to sink deeper, becoming part of the court itself, as if the wood had absorbed something it wasn't meant to. The next morning, the Phantom's equipment manager unlocked the locker room to find Eli's stall untouched, but not empty. His jersey, folded neatly, carried a chill that seeped into the manager's fingers when he picked it up. Beneath it lay an old photograph, weathered and yellowed, showing a group of boys on a cracked street court. One face stood out immediately, Eli's. Only the photo was dated 15 years earlier, long before Eli could have been the young man they had just signed. Stranger still, the other boys in the picture had all been identified by local historians. Each one had died in accidents or violence years before Eli ever arrived in North Point. No one could explain how the photo had surfaced or why it sat waiting in his locker. Whispers spread like wildfire. Reporters begged for answers, but the team issued only clipped statements, claiming Eli was taking personal leave. Behind the scenes, however, investigators combed through his records and found nothing. No birth certificate, no tax records, no contracts from any previous leagues. It was as if Eli Cross had materialized the moment the Phantom signed him. Players admitted, in guarded tones, that they found things too. A pair of shoes in his locker, scuffed and cracked as if they'd been worn for decades, though Eli had only played a handful of games. A notebook filled with play diagrams written in handwriting no one recognized, its pages smudged as though by ash. Then came the tapes. A broadcast assistant reviewing raw game footage stumbled upon a segment that hadn't aired. In it, Eli jogged down the court, but his shadow moved the opposite direction. Frame by frame, the distortion grew, the shadow peeling away until it resembled a figure with no jersey, no face, just a void chasing the ball. The tape vanished before it could be leaked, seized by league officials who insisted it was defective. But those who saw it swore the shadow lingered in their dreams for weeks afterward. Superstition sank into the Phantom's roster. Players refused to sit near Eli's empty stall. Coaches avoided saying his name out loud, referring to him only as the kid. Even the arena staff whispered about hearing dribbles in the dark when the building was locked and empty, balls echoing down the hallways though every rack sat full. The smudges on the hardwood, scrubbed night after night, always returned by morning. It was as if the court itself refused to let go of him. And then, just as fans began to move on, just as the city tried to forget, sightings began to surface. A fan swore she saw Eli sitting in the nosebleeds during a different game, eyes locked on the floor, vanishing the second she blinked. A janitor claimed to have found fresh sweat on the practice court one dawn, though no one had been scheduled to use it. It was becoming clear Eli Cross was not gone. Not entirely. He had left behind traces, clues, a presence that bound him to the game even as his body had dissolved into thin air. The hardwood had become his headstone, and the game his unfinished story. In the months after his disappearance, Eli Cross became more myth than man. The league buried his name, erasing him from official rosters and archives, but fans remembered. They painted murals of a faceless guard in a Phantom's jersey, slipping between defenders who looked more like shadows than men. Streetball courts across North Point echoed with his legend, players shouting Eli whenever someone made an impossible shot. But the stories that lingered most weren't about his highlights. They were about the sightings, the moments when the ghost players seemed to bleed back into the world, never for long, but always enough to keep the city restless. One night, weeks after his vanishing act, a late-shift custodian swore he heard the rhythmic sound of a basketball pounding the hardwood. When he entered the arena, the court lights flickered on one by one, revealing Eli at the free-throw line. He took a single shot, the ball swishing cleanly, before fading into mist. Another time, an opposing player claimed he felt a hand on his shoulder during warm-ups, firm, guiding, only to turn and find nobody there. Even the fans had their tales. A father and daughter sitting high in the rafters swore they saw a lone figure running suicides across the empty court after a blowout loss, his jersey soaked in sweat that evaporated into the air. But the most chilling accounts came from his former teammates. Some claimed Eli appeared in dreams, diagramming plays that predicted real games with eerie accuracy. Others confessed that, in moments of pressure, they still heard his voice calling out from the bench, sharp and commanding. A few even admitted to glimpsing him during games, not on the court, but in the corners of their vision, standing where the shadows pooled. They never spoke of it publicly, but in private, they admitted the same thing. Eli Cross hadn't left them. He was still playing, still chasing something unfinished, still tethered to the Phantoms like a ghost bound to its haunting ground. Years later, when the Phantoms finally made the championship, the legend surged again. In the decisive game, with the team trailing by 2 in the final seconds, fans swore the ball handler looked momentarily possessed, dribbling with Eli's rhythm, releasing a jumper with Eli's form. The shot fell, and the Phantoms won. The player credited his training, but those who remembered Eli whispered otherwise. Some even claimed that, in the victory photo, a blurred figure lingered in the background, half-faded but unmistakable, a rookie who was never supposed to exist, watching the game he could never finish. Today, the name Eli Cross is never spoken by the league. Officially, he was a clerical mistake, a ghost of paperwork and forgotten scouting reports. But in North Point, his story refuses to die. Children still carve his number into playground courts. Old fans still tell the tale of the night he vanished before thousands of eyes. And in the empty hours after a Phantoms game, when the arena hums with the silence of sleep, some say you can still hear it. The soft, steady echo of a basketball bouncing, a rhythm that belongs to no one, and to Eli Cross alone. Because legends aren't buried in record books. They live where shadows linger, where crowds still hold their breath, where the hardwood remembers. And for as long as the game is played in North Point, the ghost player will never truly be gone.